the house at Thistlewood Hollow. It began with a letter. A single cream-colored envelope, left without a stamp or return address on the chipped wooden steps of Evelyn Marrin's narrow London flat. It was damp with morning fog when she found it, yet the ink inside hadn't run. The paper was thick, folded crisply in thirds. The handwriting, elegant, calligraphic, was unfamiliar. Only 5 words adorned the top. Return to Thistlewood Hollow. No signature. No sender. Evelyn's stomach clenched. She hadn't heard that name in 17 years. Her first instinct was to burn the letter. She stood by the stove for 10 full minutes, letter clutched in a trembling hand, thumb grazing the pilot flame. But in the end she didn't. Because part of her already knew. This wasn't just an invitation. It was a summons. Evelyn hadn't spoken of the Hollow since she left it at 15. Not even to Oliver, her endlessly inquisitive fiancé who, after 3 years together, still didn't know where she'd grown up. She told people her parents were dead, which wasn't untrue. She told them she had no siblings, which was, depending on how one defined sibling, perhaps also technically true. And she told herself she'd never return, which had for a long time been the truest thing of all. Till now. The train to Northumberland took 6 hours. She barely noticed. She sat motionless in the window seat, arms crossed tightly, staring out at the increasingly wild countryside as buildings thinned and moorland swallowed the horizon. By the time she reached the last station, an unmanned platform beside a rusted, crumbling sign that still read Thistlewood, the sun was beginning to set. The platform was overgrown, its lamp long dead. No other passengers disembarked. No one had come to meet her. She half expected the house to be gone. But when she followed the winding path through the woods, over the stream where the old stones still stood like teeth, and through the briar-thick hedgerow, it was there. Exactly as she remembered it. 3 stories of black timber and red brick, too tall and too narrow, its gables jagged like a smile in the dark. The front windows were all dark, but one on the top floor flickered faintly. Still lived in then. But by whom? She stepped closer. Ivy coiled up the walls like veins, and the iron gate let out a sigh as it swung open at her touch. Inside, the house was warmer than expected. The hallway smelled of lavender and rain-soaked wood. The floorboards creaked underfoot, familiar in the way an old scar sometimes aches before weather turns. On the far wall, the portrait of her great-uncle Elias still hung, stern-faced, with storm-gray eyes and a monocle that had caught the light in all her nightmares as a child. A small card had been pinned beneath it, inked in the same calligraphy as the letter. Upstairs, second door on the left. Her heartbeat quickened. Who knew she would come? She climbed slowly, one hand trailing the old rail. At the second-floor landing she paused before the door. There was no sound beyond it. No light. She turned the knob. The room was empty. But there was a fire in the hearth. Books stacked beside a threadbare armchair. And on the side table, fresh tea still steaming. The scent of bergamot hung in the air like a ghost. Someone had just been here. And then she saw it. A mirror. Freestanding, full-length, framed in black oak. It hadn't been there before. He was certain of it. Yet there it stood, reflecting her perfectly except for one thing. In the mirror, the door behind her was closed. In reality, it stood open. She turned. Still open. She looked back. In the mirror, closed. And something else, barely visible. A figure. Standing behind her reflection. She spun. Nothing. The air was colder now. Her breath fogged faintly. She stepped toward the mirror, heart pounding, fingers trembling. The closer she came, the clearer the figure became, not behind her but behind her reflection. As though trapped in the mirror's world. A woman. Eyes black as ink. Lips stitched shut with thin silver wire. The same face from Evelyn's childhood sketches. Her imaginary friend. Only she hadn't been imaginary. And she had a name. Aunt Loria, Evelyn whispered. The figure nodded slowly. The reflection blinked. But Evelyn did not. And then the mirror went dark. She awoke in bed. Morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains. Her suitcase sat neatly unpacked at the foot of the bed. Her shoes were by the fireplace. Her clothes hung in the armoire. As though she'd never left. As though she'd always lived here. A knock echoed from downstairs. Firm. Measured. She rose, crossed the hall, descended to the front door. When she opened it, a boy stood on the steps. No older than 13. He had a parcel in his arms wrapped in black cloth. He did not smile. "You're Evelyn Marrin," he said. Not a question. She nodded. "Then this is yours." He thrust the parcel forward. "Who sent it?" she asked. He blinked. "You did." Then he turned and walked into the fog. She unwrapped the parcel. Inside was a diary. Her own. But written in a hand she didn't recognize. And dated 3 months into the future. The diary trembled in Evelyn's hands. Its leather cover was worn but unblemished. She didn't recognize the material. It was smoother than cowhide, almost silken, with tiny ridges like old fingerprints stretched across its surface. A thin, blood-red ribbon marked the first page. She flipped to it. The ink was sharp and dark, written in a style almost too precise to be human. But the most unnerving part was not the script. It was the voice she heard in her head as she read it. May 7, 2025. The morning fog lingers outside the window longer than it should. Evelyn does not eat breakfast. She opens the parcel. She does not yet know what the mirror took. Evelyn dropped the book as if it had burned her. She backed away until her shoulders hit the stair railing. It was today's date. And her exact actions, right down to skipping breakfast. What the mirror took. She darted to the mirror upstairs. But it was gone. No scorch mark. No dust ring. No sign it had ever stood there. Instead, a silver hairpin lay where the mirror's base had been. It glinted in the light, curved into the shape of a crescent moon. She recognized it immediately. It had belonged to her mother. Her dead mother. Evelyn hadn't seen that pin since the day of the fire. The hollow was always peculiar, but even as a child, Evelyn hadn't known the word for it. Now, with adult eyes and a storm of long-repressed memories swirling in her gut, she could feel it. The way time here didn't quite move in a straight line, the way rooms changed slightly when you weren't looking. The way mirrors lied. She sat at the old writing desk in the upstairs study, the one that had belonged to her great-uncle, and opened the diary again. This time she flipped ahead. May 8th. Evelyn finds the music box in the garden. It plays a song no one remembers. She will hum it in her sleep. That night, the woman behind the walls will listen. She snapped the book shut. There was no music box in the garden. She wouldn't go looking for it. The diary wasn't a prophecy. It was a trick. A manipulation. But something gnawed at her resolve. That hairpin had been real. Too real. And she had seen Loria. Not a dream. Not a hallucination. She remembered the stitched lips, the hollow eyes. The walls here remembered too. She needed air. Outside, the garden was just as overgrown as the path that had led her back here. Vines spilled over the stones and wildflowers choked the gravel walk. But somewhere beneath it all, the old garden path still held shape. Evelyn wandered without thought. The diary had said she'd find a music box, but she wasn't looking for it, not really. She was just walking. Clearing her head. That's when she stepped on it. A soft click. A crunch of soil. She looked down. Half buried in the loam was a small ornate box of silver and jade. A tiny key jutted from one side, already wound. Despite herself, Evelyn knelt and lifted it. The moment her fingers touched the metal, the box began to play. 3 delicate, chiming notes. Then 3 more. A melody slow and aching. Older than the house. It made her chest tighten and her vision blur. Because she did remember it. Barely. Not from childhood but from dreams. From a dream she'd had over and over as a child. Standing in a white room, the floor covered in feathers, while a woman in black wept in a corner and that song echoed from nowhere. She had always woken up crying. Now the music box played it again exactly. Then it stopped. The key turned no more. A voice, dry as paper, soft as ash, whispered behind her. "You've opened the door." Evelyn spun around. No one. But a rose bush nearby began to bleed. She watched in horror as dark red seeped from its thorns. Not sap, not dew, but blood. Thick and slow, coating the leaves. From beneath the bush, something moved. A hand. Pale and stiff. Reaching. She ran back to the house. Her hands fumbled the latch twice before the door gave way. She slammed it shut, heart hammering, lungs burning. Upstairs, the diary lay open. She hadn't left it that way. May 8th evening. Evelyn brings something back inside her skin. Something from under the rose bush. She does not know it yet, but her dreams will change. She clutched her arms. The skin felt strange. Tight. Like a bandage wound too hard. In the mirror at the end of the hall, where there hadn't been a mirror before, her reflection stared at her. But it wasn't blinking. And it was smiling. That night she dreamed of the attic. Not as it was, but as it had been. Full of velvet chairs, a grandfather clock with no hands, dozens of dolls suspended from the ceiling by black thread. And in the center, her mother. Sitting in a rocking chair, hair wet, face burned, the crescent moon pin holding together what was left of her scalp. "Evelyn," she rasped. "I wasn't meant to die. I stayed behind." "You're dead," Evelyn whispered. "You've always been dead." "No," her mother said, eyes wide. "You forgot." A door opened behind her. From it stepped Loria. She reached out, one silver-threaded finger pointing toward Evelyn's chest. "Something crawled in. Beneath your ribs. It grows there still." Evelyn screamed. She awoke gasping. Sweat soaked the sheets. But the worst part, the part that froze her blood, was that something moved under her skin. Just below her sternum. She threw off the covers and ran to the mirror. No wound. No mark. But her reflection. It wasn't breathing in sync with her anymore. Clickbait ending for part 2. The diary knew what was inside her. And it wasn't human. For the first time since arriving, Evelyn considered leaving. Packing her bag. Walking back through the fog. Never speaking of Thistlewood Hollow again. But as she reached for her suitcase, she found it locked. Not just latched, locked. A thick iron clasp held the case shut, welded with no keyhole. She hadn't brought a lock. She hadn't even zipped it fully when she arrived. The house had sealed it. Or the thing inside her had. That night, she sat by the fireplace with the diary in her lap and a kitchen knife beside her chair. The house creaked as if breathing. Wind moaned through the walls. And still she read. May 9th. Evelyn will attempt to forget. She will avoid the mirror. She will not notice the third reflection. The words chilled her more than the draft. Third reflection? She spent the next morning removing every mirror in the house. There were 11. Some were obvious. Above the mantel, in the bathroom, on the wardrobe. Others were hidden, behind cabinet doors, in old boxes, tucked into the back of drawers. One stood beneath a dusty bedsheet in the linen closet, a tall cheval mirror carved with winged creatures she didn't recognize. She dragged them all into the cellar. Broke each one with the flat side of a fire poker. Glass shattered like screams. She stared into the broken shards for signs of the third reflection. Her own face met her, shaken, blood-flecked, exhausted, but nothing else. Then she heard it. Vaking. Not from a clock, but beneath the floorboards. A steady tick-tick-tick like claws. The sound stopped when she reached the sitting room. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching on motes of dust. The walls were still lined with old books, tomes in Latin and Greek, bound in leather and stitched skin, and the fireplace still held ashes, long cold. Something glimmered on the mantel. A photograph in a silver frame. He picked it up. It showed the house in winter, snow thick on the roof. At the front stood a group, 5 people. She recognized her mother, her great-uncle Elias, and herself, around 8 years old. The 4th person was Loria. But the 5th. She didn't recognize him. A boy maybe 12, pale and solemn. His eyes were covered by a strip of dark cloth. His arms hung stiffly by his sides. The caption in that same calligraphic hand read, "The Sightless Seer." Her stomach turned. On the back of the photo was a date. October 31st, 2008. The night of the fire. She found the boys' room on the 3rd floor. It hadn't been touched. Dust covered everything, the writing desk, the bookshelf, the wardrobe, but the bed was made. A porcelain bowl of water sat beside it, long evaporated. The wardrobe door creaked open at her touch. Inside were clothes. A faded gray tunic, dark woolen trousers. And on the floor, 2 black ribbons. Each one stiff with old blood. She clutched the wardrobe door to steady herself. In the mirror on the opposite wall, her reflection had vanished. There was nothing there. Just the empty room. Then something moved behind her. Not in the mirror, in real life. She turned. A figure stood by the window. Small. Motionless. Blindfolded. She gasped and stumbled back. The boy's lips moved. But the voice was in her mind. "You left the gate open. "What gate?" she whispered. "The one in your chest." He raised one hand, slowly untying the blindfold. His eyes were gone. In their place, twin keyholes. And in that moment she remembered. The dreams. The lullaby. The promise she'd made long ago to something in the dark. "I didn't mean to come back," she said. The boy tilted his head. "You never left." Then he vanished. The room was empty again. But the mirror now showed three of her. The real Evelyn. Her reflection. And the third one, standing just behind them both, smiling. That night, Evelyn dreamed of the lake. The one behind the orchard where no one was supposed to go. In the dream she stood barefoot on the bank, the water like ink. A lantern floated toward her, casting no reflection. And on the other side, the orchard was upside down. Trees hung from the sky like chandeliers, their roots tangled in stars. Apples the color of blood swung silently in the dark. A voice called her name from beneath the surface. When she looked down, she saw her own face staring up from the depths. Mouth open. Eyes black. Drowning. Or waiting. She woke to find the diary had turned itself to a new page. May 10th. She remembers the orchard now. The buried bones. The song of the lake. She will go to it again. But this time something follows. Her hands were covered in soil. And under her fingernails, tiny white fragments. Bone. The next morning, Evelyn awoke in the orchard. She didn't remember walking there. Didn't remember falling asleep. But she lay among the roots of a black apple tree, the sky overhead unnaturally still, the air thick with the scent of rotten salt. It wasn't raining, yet her clothes were damp. As if she had waded through the lake. She sat up slowly. The orchard was wrong. Every tree leaned inward toward the center. Their trunks twisted like wrung towels. Apples hung low, swollen and dark, humming with flies. And in the distance, past the crooked grove, the lake shimmered like glass. But it had no reflection. Not of the trees. Not of the sky. Not of her. Evelyn stood, her legs trembling. In the soil where she'd lain, something glinted. He brushed away the dirt. A locket. Her mother's. She hadn't seen it in nearly 2 decades, not since the funeral. No, not since before that. She had placed it in the casket. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a lock of hair and a tiny photo. Of Evelyn. But not as a child. As she was now. Same clothes. Same bruised eyes. Someone had taken this photo recently. Maybe yesterday. She turned it over. Scratched into the metal back in tiny letters. "You looked behind you." Something stirred in the lake. She turned toward it, the locket clutched to her chest. The surface rippled, though no wind blew. The trees didn't move. The air didn't shift. Yet ripples spread from the center, widening slowly, silently. Then the surface bulged. Like something pushing up from underneath. She stepped backward. A shape broke the water. It was not a person. It was not an animal. It was a door. A wooden door, upright in the center of the lake, bobbing slightly, its edges waterlogged, its brass handle etched with crescent moons. No frame. No hinges. It turned slowly in place, then stilled. The ripples stopped. The door stood on the water, unmoving. Waiting. She should have run. But instead Evelyn walked toward it. She stepped into the shallows, then deeper until the water touched her waist. It was warm. Too warm. Like blood. No mud beneath her feet. Just smooth stone. As she reached the door, the lake deepened suddenly and she began to float. Her hands grasped the edges. No sound. No breeze. The sky itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the door opened. It swung inward on invisible hinges. Revealing blackness. Not shadow. Not fog. Absence. A color she had never seen. The hue of nothing. She heard a voice inside her head, faint and echoing. "You left something here." She stepped through. The orchard was upside down. She stood on sky. The trees above her, below her, hung with silver fruit. Stars flickered through the roots. And a path wound forward between the limbs. Evelyn walked. There was no sound here. No heartbeat. No breath. But something was watching. From the sky orchard around her, she felt eyes. Many. Unblinking. She followed the path until she reached a clearing. In its center, a stone altar. Upon it a doll. One of her own. Old. Threadbare. She remembered this doll. Her name was Clara. Evelyn had lost her the night of the fire. Now Clara lay face down on the stone. And carved into the surface beneath her body were 7 symbols. She didn't recognize the language, but something deep in her mind did. And one of the symbols pulsed red. The same shape as the scar beneath her ribs. He touched it. And screamed. Flashes. The fire. The woman behind the wall. The boy with keyhole eyes. The music box melody played backward, echoing like a scream. Then, silence. She stood in her childhood bedroom. Clean. Intact. Before the fire. Before everything. The locket hung from her neck. Clara sat on the shelf. And her mother was singing in the hallway. Evelyn stepped out, stunned. The house gleamed. Polished wood. Warm light. The scent of bread. She wandered slowly downstairs. Her mother stood in the kitchen. Smiling. Stirring something on the stove. She turned. Darling, she said. There you are. Evelyn froze. What is this? She whispered. Her mother blinked. Breakfast, silly. This isn't real. Her mother walked to her, placed a hand on her cheek. What's not real? Tears welled in Evelyn's eyes. I saw you die. Her mother's face darkened. No, she said. You saw me burn. But you didn't stay. You ran. You left me. Evelyn stepped back. The kitchen shifted. Its warmth drained. The light flickered. Smoke curled from beneath the stove. Her mother's skin cracked, charred. Hair blackened and fell. Eyes melted like wax. You made a promise, the burning thing said. Evelyn turned and ran. The hallway stretched as she fled. It grew longer, darker. Doors appeared on either side, each with her name etched above them. From behind the doors, voices whispered. Do you remember the bones? Do you remember the third twin? Do you remember what you fed the mirror? She clutched her ears. No, none of this is real. She burst through a door at the end. And fell. Into the lake. She emerged on the shore, gasping, soaked. The orchard around her had burned. Trees blackened. Apples turned to ash. The locket still clutched in her hand. She rolled onto her back and stared at the sky. Stared back. The clouds had eyes. Everywhere. Blinking slowly. Watching. She didn't return to the house that night. Instead she built a fire beside the lake. Wrapped herself in the old blanket she'd found on the porch. And for the first time in days she tried to sleep without dreams. But when she closed her eyes, she heard a voice. Not the boy. Not Loria. Not her mother. But her own voice whispering from inside her skull. Tomorrow you'll remember the name. The one that ends the house. And then you'll have to say it. Morning came like a bruise. The sky above the lake was tinged yellow, thick with low-hanging clouds that did not move. The fire Evelyn had built had gone out on its own. No smoke, no embers. As though time here only pretended to pass. She stood, every muscle aching. Her clothes were still damp from the lake, though her skin was warm. Feverish. The locket in her pocket had turned cold. She removed it and opened it again. This time the photograph had changed. It was no longer her face. It was the house. But not the house as she knew it. This version was older, half buried in the earth, its windows bricked over. Roots climbed the walls like veins. A single word was scrawled beneath it. Joriel. She didn't recognize the name. But her body did. At the sound of it in her mind, her heart skipped a beat. And the trees around her shivered. She returned to the house at noon. The front door was open. Not ajar, open. As though someone had flung it wide in welcome. Or warning. The entryway was dim, the light no longer natural. It had a reddish tinge as though filtered through old glass. Every mirror she'd destroyed had reassembled. Shards hovered in the air like frozen birds, each piece vibrating softly. They turned as she passed, angling to catch her reflection. She kept her eyes down. The diary was still on the fireplace mantel. But it had grown. Its spine bulged with new pages, its cover wet to the touch. She opened it to the next marked page. May 11th. She has spoken the first syllable. The house now sees her. The others will begin to wake. Beneath the text, a small ink drawing had been added. 3 doors. Each one sealed. Each one with her face drawn over it, eyes scratched out. She slammed the diary shut. And the sound echoed through the house 5 times. Like a signal. Something moved upstairs. She crept toward the staircase, each step groaning beneath her. At the top, the hallway was longer than before. Again, the house stretching itself, distorting for her discomfort. But now the doors were open. Each room she passed revealed a different version of a memory. Her childhood bedroom flooded with water. Her mother's study wallpapered in skin. The attic filled with hundreds of Evelyns, all seated at desks, all writing the same phrase over and over. I remember the third twin. In the last room she found the boy again, blindfolded, standing in the corner. But this time he spoke aloud. "Do you know your name?" he asked. Evelyn froze. "What?" "Your true name," he said. "The one she carved from your ribs." She shook her head. He turned slowly and blood began to drip from beneath his blindfold. "She hid it inside the orchard," he said. "Where the roots never grew. Where the breath of the house can't reach." "Who is she?" The boy tilted his head. "You called her mother." Downstairs the fireplace roared to life. He ran to it. Inside the flames a shape twisted, feminine, tall, cloaked in something blacker than shadow. The voice came from the fire itself. "You returned to me," it said, warm and cruel. "You remembered." "I didn't choose to." "You did," the voice insisted. "When you opened the door in your chest. When you fed me the name the first time." Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "What is Joriel?" The fire paused. Then laughter. "Not what, child?" "Who?" A gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the flame in a single breath. And behind her, footsteps. She turned quickly, raising the fire poker like a sword. It was Loria. But not as before. Her eyes were solid white. Her mouth stitched closed. Her feet hovered slightly above the floor. She reached out with one hand, trembling. From her throat came a gurgling whisper. "Run." Then her eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Evelyn carried Loria to the sitting room, laying her on the couch. She stirred faintly, muttering in sleep. On the wall beside the couch hung a painting she hadn't seen before. It was new. Painted in blood. It showed the lake. And in the water, dozens of doors, all floating open. From each something slithered out. White-limbed things. Mouths where their eyes should be. Seeing. At the bottom of the canvas, a single word was scrawled. Joriel. That night, Evelyn didn't sleep. She sat in the kitchen with the diary, tracing the symbols she'd seen on the altar. Each one pulsed faintly beneath her fingers. She remembered what the boy had said. Where the breath of the house can't reach. That meant outside. That meant the orchard. She had to find the tree with no roots. The hollow spot. The burial site. She had to dig. At dawn she walked back into the orchard with a shovel. The trees whispered. Their leaves murmured her name in dead voices. She searched for hours. Finally, near the edge of the lake she found it. A circle of trees, each one warped away from the center, as though something had pushed them back. The soil there was darker. Wet but not with water. She drove the shovel into the earth. Dug through layers of ash, bone and black feathers. Then she hit wood. A box. She pried it open. Inside, wrapped in velvet. A name, carved into a strip of her childhood bedsheet. Not written. Carved. Letters raised and angry, bleeding faintly even now. Ivraneth. It wasn't a name she'd ever heard. But she knew it. In her marrow. This was her true name. The one her mother had stolen. The one that ended the house. She folded the cloth and tucked it under her shirt. As she rose, something stepped into the clearing. Not human. Not creature. A version of her. Stretched, boneless, eyes wide and black. It opened its mouth. And she heard her own voice, echoed back like a hymn. "I remember what you are." Then it rushed at her. The thing wearing her face lunged across the clearing, its limbs bending the wrong way. Evelyn barely dove aside in time. It landed with a wet crunch, mouth open far too wide, tongue flicking in the air like a serpent tasting her fear. She scrambled backward, clutching the strip of bedsheet with her carved name, Ivraneth, tight to her chest. The doppelganger turned its head, cracking sounds echoing through its neck. Then it began to sing. Not words. Not melody. But intent. And the orchard responded. The ground trembled. The roots of the surrounding trees writhed like worms. The air grew thick and viscous as if Evelyn were breathing oil. From beneath the soil came the sound of hundreds of tiny mouths, whispering, "Give her back." Evelyn ran. The trees grabbed at her, branches lowering like arms. One snagged her sleeve and tore it clean off. Another scraped her cheek. Blood ran down her face and disappeared before it could drip. The orchard drank it. Behind her, the twisted version of herself chased without footsteps. Silent. Smooth. Gliding. She burst from the grove into the clearing behind the house, lungs burning. The sun was gone. In its place, a red circle in the sky, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. And the house. It had changed again. It breathed. With every exhale, the windows expanded outward. With every inhale, the roof caved slightly inward. The walls shimmered like flesh. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She ran inside. The foyer was dark and warm. Too warm. Wet like a womb. The floor beneath her feet squelched. Wallpaper bled at the seams. Light bulbs pulsed like swollen eyes. And from the second-floor landing, her mother watched. But this was no longer a memory. The woman descending the stairs was tall. Too tall. Limbs elongated, her neck arching like a crane's, her mouth stitched shut with thread made of black hair. Her eyes wept ink. She opened her arms. "Come back to me," she whispered, not aloud but inside Evelyn's skull. "Be whole again." Evelyn held up the strip of cloth. "Ivraneth," she said aloud. The house screamed. The sound came from the walls, the floors, the furniture. Everything in the house was the house. Everything was her. The stitched mother staggered back, clutching her face as black smoke poured from her sockets. Evelyn repeated the name louder this time. "Ivraneth." The walls cracked. Mirrors shattered. The air turned cold. Then came the boy. He stepped from the library, barefoot, eyes no longer blindfolded. But he had no eyes at all. Only skin, smooth and unbroken. "You shouldn't have remembered," he said, voice like paper tearing. "But I did." He opened his mouth. Inside it, dozens of other mouths screamed. He raised one hand and pointed. "You must finish it." Evelyn knew what to do. She didn't know how, but the knowledge unfolded in her mind like a long-forgotten dream. She ran for the basement. The final heart of the house. The origin. The descent. As she opened the basement door, the house fought back. Stairs rippled, trying to throw her. Dark tendrils reached up from the steps. The air itself thickened, resisting her movement. But she pressed forward, chanting her name. "Ivraneth, Ivraneth, I am not what you buried." Each syllable pushed the darkness back a little farther. When she reached the bottom, she saw it. The true form of the house. A heart. A massive, pulsing, living heart embedded in the wall. Veins ran from it into every floorboard, every beam. Faces swam beneath its surface. Her own, Loria's, the boys', others she didn't know. It beat in time with her breath. As she stepped closer, it slowed. Listen. Then. A voice, ancient and immense, whispered from it. "I am the house. I am your mother. I am the one who kept you safe. Return to me." Evelyn lifted the cloth. "My name is Ivraneth," she said, voice shaking but strong. "You do not own me." The heart trembled. "You are mine." "No," she whispered. "You're what I survived." She pressed the cloth to the heart. And spoke one final word. "End." The explosion was not sound. It was absence. Silence so total it erased everything. Then came the collapse. The heart tore open like overripe fruit, spewing light and ash and ink. The walls screamed. The stairs folded in on themselves. Rooms vanished like breath on glass. And Evelyn was falling again. She landed on grass. Real grass. The sky above was blue. The wind cool. Birds chirped, distant and alive. She sat up. Behind her, the house at Thistlewood Hollow was gone. No rubble. No foundation. Just a circle of blackened earth where it had stood. Loria sat nearby, arms around her knees, crying softly. When Evelyn looked down, the cloth with her name was gone. So was the locket. But her scar had disappeared. She touched her ribs. Smooth. Whole. She lay back in the grass and closed her eyes. And dreamed of nothing. For the first time in years. Clickbait ending for part 6. She destroyed the house. But something else crawled out of its heart. The morning after the collapse, Evelyn and Loria left Thistlewood Hollow on foot. No one asked where they had come from. No roads led to the town. None ever had. Yet they arrived. They found shelter in a cottage near the forest's edge, the same one that once stood in the margin of Evelyn's dreams. Familiar but softened by time. It had books with real pages. A kettle that whistled. Windows that showed only sky and trees. Never faces. Evelyn didn't speak for 3 days. Not out of fear, but because silence finally meant peace. On the 4th day, Loria entered her room holding an envelope. It had been left at their door. No footprints in the dirt. No knock. Just the envelope. Evelyn opened it. Inside, a photograph. Not of the house. Of the orchard. But not as it had been. This one floated below the lake. Like a mirage, the trees growing upside down in the water, their fruit shaped like mouths. On the back, written in a hand Evelyn recognized but couldn't name. You forgot the 3rd orchard. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. She lit the fireplace and sat with the photograph on her lap, staring at it for hours. The 3rd orchard. She'd only ever known 2. The one above, rotted, dead, whispering. And the one in dreams, burnt, full of ash and ghosts. But this was different. This orchard breathed. She could see the water around it bend as though something stirred inside. At dawn she made a decision. I have to go back, she told Loria. No, Loria said. It's finished. It's not. We ended the house. Not what came before it. Loria stood slowly. You saw it too, didn't you? Evelyn nodded. In your dreams? Loria asked. No, Evelyn said. In the reflection. They returned to the lake in silence. It had changed. The surface was still as glass. Birds wouldn't fly over it. No frogs. No insects. Not even a breeze. At the shoreline, Evelyn removed her shoes and stepped in. The water was warm. Welcoming. A memory, not a threat. She walked until it reached her neck. Then Dove. What she saw beneath the lake would have driven her mad a year ago. But not now. Not after the house. He was not Evelyn anymore. He was Ivernith. Below the lake, the orchard bloomed. Its trees hung upside down, branches reaching toward the surface. Each one bore fruit, glowing softly, faces inside. Memories. Possibilities. Warnings. She swam among them like a ghost, brushing against leaves that felt like whispers. At the center of the orchard stood a tree twice the size of the others. Its roots spiraled into a black pit. A hole not of the lake, but of time. And tied around its trunk, another strip of cloth. He took it. On it, the name you left behind. She surfaced gasping. In her hands the second cloth steamed in the morning air. When she laid it beside the first, something happened. The 2 strips, once separate, merged. Thread by thread they sewed themselves together. And the name changed. Not Evelyn. Not Ivernith. But something older. A name she could not say aloud without tasting fire. A name the house had feared. And beneath that name, a location. 3 words. Below the orchard. She returned alone. Loria begged her not to. But this was a path only one could walk. She arrived at the circle of blackened earth where the house had once stood. The orchard too had died. Its trees were dust now. No more whispers. But Evelyn walked to the center and dug again. Not with a shovel. With her hands. The soil gave way quickly like it remembered her. And beneath it, a door. Wooden, circular, veined with gold. No lock. No hinges. Only a single inscription. Once opened, never forgotten. She placed her palm flat against it. And it opened. Inside was a staircase. Stone. Spiral. Endless. She descended. With every step her memories unraveled. Names she'd never known returned. Lifetimes forgotten sang in her blood.